And that's why when I tweeted about finally we have the right person in HHS with Bobby Kennedy who will take this on, and that we have doctors that will be like Marty McCary, who I don't know, but I do know he's a surgeon who can understand and touch and feel what it means to be there on behalf of the patient. And my support for that, I think we have a chance now to completely turn this around in this next few years.
I think this last election was in part about that. I think the national realization that COVID there was something very dark there. It wasn't just a virus that happened upon us naturally, that there was a lot of evil bound up in it. But just to back up a second, you said you have learned from watching COVID that a few people can hurt so many. Who are those people?
I think the main culprit really sitting there was Collins.
Francis Collins.
Francis Collins. And he controlled, I mean, I had shared with President Trump that Francis Collins should not be the NIH director. He offered me a job. Peter Thiel nominated me. And I've since found emails of Francis Collins sending an email to a politician that alarm bells, Peter Thiel has nominated Patrick Soon-Shiong. We have to find a way to stop it.
Why?
To this day, power, greed, political need. He did the same thing with Craig Venter. I remember during Clinton's time with the Human Genome Project, where Craig Venter invented the sequencing machine for tens of millions of dollars, and he was spending billions of dollars doing nothing but wanted the credit. I think what happens to you when you get into Washington, the ego, greed, and power changes your mindset. So I can't give motivation to that. All I can tell you is when I saw that email, I was devastated that somebody would actually go to that extent and then send that same email to the CEO of Bio, which is all big pharma. And that CEO of Bio said, let's go to Google search to find some dirt on him.
Dirt on you?
On me. To stop me from being nominated to be head of NIH or whatever.
Let's Google him to stop him?
Let's Google to find some dirt, some bad stuff, negative research, whatever they want to find. They probably couldn't find any dirt on me, but that was the interchange between them on email.
But the funny thing is you made a product, and by the way, just a clarification of terms. My understanding was a vaccine was administered to a healthy person to prevent him from getting the disease. You're describing a product, the one that you made, that you can inject into an infected person and it cures the infection. That sounds more like a conventional medicine than a vaccine.
It's a therapeutic.
A therapeutic.
Correct. So, I use the word vaccine because that's what they understood. It's dogma and terminology.
Right. But you're giving this to people who have COVID, who have HIV.
Well, I want to give it to people who don't have COVID so we can actually, if they do get COVID, but then I am now giving to patients with HIV. I'm giving to people with HPV. I'm giving it to people who are getting cancer and have cancer. And more importantly, there's 1 in 280 Americans. 1 in 280 Americans have this thing called Lynch syndrome. What Lynch syndrome is a genetic predisposition of an 80% increase of colon cancer, ovarian cancer, breast cancer. It's a genetic predisposition where your cells don't repair themselves.
Yes. I lost a friend to this, yes.
We are in clinical trials for the BioShield for patients with Lynch syndrome. We now have 100 patients enrolled already, giving them this BioShield that'll prevent cancer. So it's one of the first trials of prevention of cancer, rigor and treatment of cancer. Then this drug, this BioShield, I think people not want to call it a vaccine, has just gotten approved in 2024 for bladder cancer. We now have people who failed everything, who would have their bladder removed. Think about that, your bladder removed, a 9% mortality just from the surgery alone, where we're giving them this bioshield. That's all they got is a subcutaneous injection, into the bladder. And they are now free of disease, still complete remission, 9 years out. Alive today. We're going to talk to them. Published. We have patients with metastatic pancreatic cancer. We just published. Was free of disease 5 years out. Senator Reid, who came to see me after having failed all other treatment with his pancreatic cancer, spread to his liver, came to see me and he said to me, Patrick, I'm here, but I checked with Francis Collins who said, don't go. I said, well, Senator Reid, it's your choice. He said, I'm coming. And we gave him the therapy. And his CA19 went down to normal. And he lived for two years, free of disease. He actually was very active. We had a patient with Merkel cell carcinoma, which is a terrible disease of failed everything. He came into our clinic, complete response. 9 years out, and he died of other causes. The reason I met Robert Jr., I've not known him for about 4 months, is I called Bobby Shriver.
His cousin.
His cousin. And the reason I knew Bobby Shriver, because Bobby called me 7 years prior to that, saying, Patrick, I'm on the city council of Santa Monica, and the mayor of Santa Monica has this terrible tumor in his head and neck. It's ulcerating under his chin, ulcerating through his jaw, and UCLA and Cedars-Sinai said, he's got 2 weeks to live, he's got to go to hospice. Can you see him? I said, absolutely, Bobby. I think he needs our natural killer cells. He needs our bioshield. So I brought him to our clinic, which we have in Los Angeles, in El Segundo. The nurses broke into tears. The nurses says, Patrick, what are you doing? UCLA said he has to go to hospice. You should give this man. I said, no, you don't understand. We can dynamically activate this. And this is all as an outpatient. We got him into complete remission. Complete remission.
To the extent still alive?
So it healed, and this melted the tumor. He went home because it was exposed. A little bleed happened in the blood vessel. His family took him to St. John's, and then they called me frantically and says, the doctor says, do not resuscitate. I said, what? Let me speak to that doctor. He said, well, it's bleeding, and it's got this thing. I think he was in his late 70s, early 80s. I said, please clip it. It's a complete response, and we're going to do a flap to cover that. He did. We did the flap. He lived for 2 years, was able to eat. So when I called Bobby and I said, Bobby, you remember what we did? He said, absolutely, Patrick. A lot of people have asked me to introduce to Robert. You know, Robert and I don't speak very much. We've had an argument about his ideas, and I said, I understand, but I'm going to give your number to Robert, to Bobby Kennedy, and he'll call you. Bobby called me in 10 minutes, and I said, Bobby, I'd like to introduce myself. He said, Patrick, can I meet with you? I said, please. And he came to meet with me at my home, and we had this long conversation. And I realized, I watched your show with him. He is what he is, an authentic man with a sense of purpose, conviction, courage. He says what he really believes. Sometimes it may be wrong, sometimes it may be right, but he says what he believes. And I really believed, oh my God, here's somebody who would have the courage to take on the world and ask the questions. And I said, I'm going to support you. And that's what happened. That's how I got to know him.
Amazing. He was dismissed by, not just dismissed, attacked and vilified by a lot of people in the medical establishment, I would say. Everybody. Why were you willing to listen to him?
Because what he's saying is exactly what I was saying. And I'm sort of attacked by these same people because of the dogma that's out there. So let me give you this example. I said, Bobby, and I shared with him the story about Hope Hicks. I said, that you probably just walked out to the office and I walked in 2016, 2017. I said, listen, people think of you as saying you shouldn't have a polio vaccine, that you're an anti-vaccinator. What you really are saying, you're worried about the excipients inside the vaccine. So
about the what?
Okay, so that's a technical. The materials that go in with the vaccine.
Yes, the mercury, etc.
The mercury, etc. So I understand there's a polio vaccine. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 polio vaccines that have now been manufactured. And now that all of a sudden there's a new polio vaccine that's manufactured in which we have cow's serum, calf serum, inside that vaccine. And I know, and you know, everybody knows, in the UK knows, you can get prion disease from this calf serum because you can't measure that. So that got approved in 4 days, just because of safety, the way dogma is happening. But there's other polio vaccines. So you can take the other polio vaccines, but don't take that one. Just like I was telling you about, maybe I was telling you about Propofol's story over breakfast. And you should explain it that way, that you want it just to be examined. And he said, exactly. I said, okay. Not only did I get him, he is asking the right questions. And people are scared to ask these questions because there's perverse incentives. And that was what bothered me.
But in science, shouldn't any question be allowed?
Exactly. So when I tweeted, I said, he knows more science than most doctors. He's much of a...
It's a good thing you're rich, because you'd be out of a job tweeting stuff like that.
But it is, right? And that's what's a blessing, I think. You know, I live the American dream, and that's why you said, okay, I made this money. The money is for the purpose of me able to do this. And I was very concerned about being too loud about it, because if this deep state would hold up the approval, and they did, by the way, they put us into complete response letter. I got 1,000 requests for information. My submission was close to 700,000 pages in order to get this thing through.
700,000? It's like the U.S. tax code.
This drug has been in trials now for 8 years. 2015.
How long was the Pfizer mRNA COVID vaccine in trials?
Months.
A month.
Not even. So that's why I'm trying to say, you know, when you...
I know which one I'm taking.
You know, when you would talk about the user fees. So we thought that the user fees was going to accelerate the approval, where the FDA gets user fees from pharma. It turns out that the big pharma user fees are so large, it pays for the salary for all these reviewers. So now the biotech companies, the young biotech companies, are throttled. So the big pharma that does just incremental little dots that just follow the revenue, this checkpoints, multi-billion-dollar, Merck's, what, 20 billion, 30 billion on the revenue. Bristol Myers follows it. AstraZeneca follows it. Roche follows it. They're all the same, but it's all about incremental sameness and follow the dollar. But the innovation is really at this young biotech companies that are throttled. This is what needs to be changed by the FDA today. They need a complete revamp where people with skill sets and the skill sets of the modern science, not the old drugs, have to be in place to understand what's at stake here.